Greetings, Cap fans, and welcome to episode 230 of the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast. I'm Rick Verbanis, and I'm your host. I've got a co-host. You know him. That's Bob Lucius. Oh, Bob, you've never heard of the Millennium Falcon? It's a ship that made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs. I've outrun Imperial starships, not the local bulk cruisers, mind you. I'm talking about the big Carillion ships now. She's fast enough for you, old man.
Well, nicely done, Rick. Nicely done. You will not be voicing our Indiana Jones uh, comic book podcast,
No, I will not. Yeah.
but nicely done anyway. Yeah,
Uh,
good stuff, right?
yeah. Why am
Yeah.
I agreeing with the Star Wars quote, Bob?
Because tonight we have none other than Karl Kesel himself, who that run was named after.
That's right. Yeah. Um, yeah, it's funny. No, I trust me. I was not trying to do a Harrison Ford accent. You know who does a great Harrison Ford impersonation?
Harrison Ford.
Mark Hamill.
Oh, that's right.
Have you ever heard
I've
him?
seen him do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
He's like, "Hey, kid, it ain't that kind of movie." You know, he
I
just,
see that he did it like in front of Harrison Ford on one show I caught a
oh
clip
yeah,
of. Yeah, it's quite
yeah,
funny. Yeah.
yeah. It's far. Yeah. Yeah, so that's my opening to you, Bob. You know, I almost went with a really bad dad joke. It's but I couldn't pass up the Kessel Run. Um,
No.
the dad joke would have been, "Hey, Bob, what time is it when you go to the dentist?"
What time is it when I go to the dentist, Rick?
2:30, because you know it's episode 230.
Oh, that would have been a great one too. 2:30.
Oh well,
Oh, I can't wait to use that one.
it's really bad.
I
You
got
run, you
class
sure you want
tomorrow.
to?
I'm going to be pulling that one out. Yeah.
Oh,
So,
oh boy.
uh,
What did I create?
classic.
How you doing, Bob? Anything new going on with you?
No, same old stuff. Anything else going on? Nothing else going on. No, I've just been super excited about tonight's interview because we've been reading the Patriot and I've been diving in Karl Kessel's other Captain America contributions, and some of those I haven't read in a while, so it's like visiting an old friend.
Yeah, yeah. I'm looking forward to talking with Carl.
Mhm.
Yeah. I gotta tell you, I had a an interesting um I had an interesting episode at work the other day. So where I work, they do a blood drive. You know, you could do it every 3 months, right? So they do it 4 times a year, and I always sign up and do my duty because what would Cap do, right? So um, every once in a while, I'll get my local Elks will do a blood drive, and I got on that email list, whatever. So the last month, 4 weeks ago, they were supposed to do it at my work, but it got canceled. And so I was like, okay, well, they'll let me know when the next one is. And then I'm getting emails from the Elks like, hey, we got this one coming up. So I reach out to the work person who runs this and I'm like, hey, uh, are we going to do another one? Because if not, I'm going to go and do it over here. And they're like, no, we're going to do it. And then they send me something and they schedule it. Right. And so I say all that because I really wanted to make this happen, right? So and I have to like parse out my schedule. I give up working out because you can't go to the gym after you just give blood. Like I make a point to do this. So anyway, I go and I show up and you go through the whole thing where you go through the questionnaire, they prick your finger, they test your iron, like blah blah blah, they give you this, and then now you go and you sit down in this other room,
They ask you
and I go,
like, who have you had sex with? And you're
oh
like,
yeah, all that stuff,
why?
yeah.
What have you heard? Right?
um and and so I'm now in the next stage and I'm sitting there And they were like, all right, come over here. What arm do you want to do? Left or right? I'm like, I like to have the left arm done. So they are like, okay, well, you could sit here because they have the benches that you lay on, and you could
Right.
do either, the bench either has a place for your right arm and nothing on the left, or something on the left, nothing on the
Right.
right. Right. So this is important to the story.
Yeah.
So she goes, okay, well, go ahead and sit here. Now, the one that was there was 4 feet away from the speaker that was playing very loud music,
Yeah.
which I didn't like.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to sit there for
Yeah.
30 or 40 minutes
Yeah.
listening that close to loud music
That you
because
didn't like.
I
Yeah.
didn't like.
Yeah.
So I said, "Oh," and I saw one on the other side of the room,
Yeah.
20 feet away. I'm like, "Hey, can I do that one over there? That one has a place for left." And the woman's like, "Well, uh, you know, well, why?" And so at this point, I don't lie. I normally don't lie
Yeah.
ever, right?
Yeah.
But a little white lie to kind of save feelings,
Yeah.
I will
Uh-huh.
occasionally
Uh-huh.
do it, and I did. And I said, well, the music's a little loud, and I have a headache. So,
Yeah.
and I start walking
Oh.
over there.
Oh no.
I didn't want to say it's too loud and I don't like your music,
Yeah.
right? I didn't want to
Right.
do that. So,
Yeah. No.
I go walking over. She goes, oh, well, if you have a headache,
Yeah.
I can't take your blood.
I knew that was coming. Yeah.
And now
Yes.
I just told you the whole story of everything I did to make
Yeah.
this
Right.
happen,
Could be head
right?
cancer. Right. They can't take your.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And so I look at her and I was like, I don't have a headache. I'm fine. I don't have a headache. And she goes, I have to take the first thing you tell me. And I'm like, but like, no, it's fine. I'm okay. And so she
Yeah.
leaves.
Yeah.
She goes, she gets on her phone and she
Mhm.
calls her supervisor. She comes back a few minutes later. My supervisor says, I can't take your blood. Okay. So here's the thing.
Uh-huh.
Um, I was just being nice. I I I was saying because your music was very loud and I didn't want to ask you to turn it down because you have a long day and you're enjoying the music and I didn't want to change that. So now I'm embarrassed and I'm just
Oh,
I just want to give my blood.
we can't take your blood if you're embarrassed.
I feel like I'm George Costanza in a
I know,
Seinfeld
right.
episode,
You took the
right?
book into the bathroom. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just, and she's like, all right, well, all right, I'm like, can I talk to your supervisor? She's like, no, you cannot talk to my supervisor. So she goes and she leaves a voice message. I sit there for 22 minutes waiting for her to come back, and then she finally comes back and goes, yeah, my supervisor said, yeah, that's fine. So then they go and take my blood. So that
Like,
was my, yeah, yeah, right.
I'm having a hard time finding that artery. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, good story, Rick.
I appreciate it.
Day in the life.
Oh, Bob, you know who's having a birthday soon?
I do not.
Well, if you are listening to this episode on the day it comes out, which is Wednesday, March 5th, March 6th is the birthday of none other than Kieran Dwyer.
Kieran Dwyer. All right.
Yeah,
Excellent.
you like his cap work?
I do actually. I mean, I did grow up during that time period a little bit, so I do recall reading, his stuff right off the rack. So, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, listen, I I found it refreshing because there was I wasn't a big fan of the artwork that was right before him.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of, I'm just like, I'm picking up Cap because I'm picking up Cap,
Right. Yeah.
and I'm not enjoying the art. And then he came on, and I was like, ooh, I like this.
Yeah.
And then he drew some, I just liked I liked his art. And then
Yeah.
of course, you compound that with Mark Grunwald's, the Captain storyline,
Yeah.
and then it was really enjoyable. So
Yeah.
yeah, I really enjoyed it. I would put him, he's definitely in my top 10 of
Yeah.
Captain America artists of all time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, and I think he'd be in mine as well. What's he doing these days?
He does some commissions, although he kind of slowed to answer. I did get a commission from him maybe like 4 or 5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I had him do a an homage to the cover he did for Captain America
I
350.
remember seeing that.
Right, so
Yeah, I've seen that in
which
your
is
collection.
the captain versus um, Captain America,
Right.
right? So it was Steve versus
Johnny
John
Walker.
Walker,
Yeah.
and so I had him replace um, John Walker with Crossbones
Right.
because that's a character he co-created
Yeah.
with with Mark Grunwald, and then I had Steve Rogers in the Captain America uniform. So it was basically the same kind of pose
Yeah.
as Captain America
With the
350. So
350. Right. Yeah.
yeah, it was a cool cover.
Yeah.
And
Nice.
what he did, which I was not aware of, but in that background of Captain America 350, there's like this starburst effect going on,
Mm-hmm.
and but when he did the commission, he made the starburst a little bit more distinct, and it's the outline of the skull's head. And I never
Oh.
knew that when looking
Yeah.
at the cover to
Oh,
Captain
I'll be
America
darned.
350
Yeah.
that is in the background.
Huh.
But it's very, very subtle because you're not supposed to know that the red skull's behind everything.
Right. 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 Oh, interesting. I'll have to go back and
Yeah,
take a look at that tonight.
spoiler.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've kept Carl in the green room a little long. Should we bring him on board?
Let's get him in here already.
All right. Well, our guest today has been a prolific comic book writer and inker for the last 40 years. He may be best known for his years on the various Superman titles, including writing the Reign of Superman storyline following Superman's death, in which he co created the new Superboy with artist Tom Grummett. He launched also the first Harley Quinn series way back in 2000. For Marvel, he worked on two lengthy stints on the Fantastic Four series and dozens of other characters. And he's been nominated for both Eisner and Inkwell Awards for Best Inker multiple times for his work inking over 6,000 pages and 300 stories during his career. Cap fans may know him best as the writer for Captain America the Patriot miniseries we recently covered, as well as the Captain America 1940s newspaper strip miniseries, both from 2010. And he also inked Mark Waid's Captain America Man at a Time miniseries shortly after. We are very excited to have Karl Kesel join us today. Karl, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Glad to be here.
So, Karl, we want to chat about your amazing Cap stories, but before we do, let's talk about your earlier days. So, you broke into DC Comics in 1984 as an inker, and
hmm
then you spend the next 10 years mostly with DC
hmm
until you start to get regular work with Marvel in the mid 90s. Now, did you grow up reading comics, and did you prefer either Marvel or DC as a fan?
I did grow up reading comics. I started reading when I was about 10 years old. I picked up scattered comics before that, but when I was 10 years old, which was 1969, our family took most of the summer to drive cross country and back again. It was a month-long vacation. And at the halfway point was Disneyland, because I grew up on the East Coast. So we traveled down through the southern tier, Disneyland, came back through the northern part of the country. And you know what that means? It means a lot of long, boring hours in a car. Boy, were they long, boring hours. But
Counting license
but
plates.
but back then you'd stop at a gas station and they had comics. And I would pick up, we were gone long enough, and gas stations never like got rid of their back stock, you know? So we were gone long enough that I could get two or even three or maybe four issues of a comic in a row. And I started realizing, oh, these stories are interconnected. Not even are the stories interconnected, but the Marvel at the time, the Marvel universe was really, interconnected, and that really grabbed me. And quite honestly, it was very shortly after that that I decided this is what I want to do. I want to work in comics.
And
And
what age do you think that was?
I was 10 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, up till then, I wanted to be a veterinarian. But one summer, we went to the New York State Fair, and you guys are on the East Coast. Where are you?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
In
I'm in
New
New Jersey. Bob's in Florida.
Florida. Well, at the time, at least in the New York State Fair, they had a pavilion where you could walk in and see large animal surgeries performed
Oh,
live.
no.
And my
Who would
mom,
want
because
that?
well, my mom said, "You want to be a veterinarian? this is what you're going to have to do. And I was thinking more like cats and dogs, but she took me in and I watched them like carve open a cow. And I just said, I don't think I want to be a veterinarian.
Oh my gosh. Fry bread, anybody?
Yeah, really.
Jeez.
It was 69 or before 69 that, so, but anyway, so when I thought of comics, it sounded like a much more pleasant occupation than a veterinarian.
And did you have a favorite back then?
Well, I will say I was a Marvel boy. I loved Marvel comics back then. I my first favorite Marvel comic was the X-Men. The Werner Roth, he was just leaving the book when I started reading it. And then, Steranko did a few issues, and then this guy called Neil Adams came on for a few
Mm.
issues. And I love that book. I love the X-Men, and it got canceled. And then what was the next book? No, actually, I take it back. The first book I loved was The Silver Surfer. I actually picked up Silver Surfer #1 off of the stands, and I still have it, and it's in really, really, really bad shape.
I
Um,
bet. Yeah, that's
but
great you
um,
have it.
but but I love that comic, and it was canceled. So then I decided X-Men was my favorite comic, and it got canceled. And then I decided Daredevil was my favorite comic, and it went bi-monthly. And I felt like I was like a curse on comics. But I was definitely a Marvel boy. I love the Marvels. I remember at the time, like when I was 10 years old, I would read DC comics, the Superman, and I would have to say specifically the Superman comics, and I kept thinking, I think I'll like these better when I'm older. They seem more mature. That's really kind of what I was thinking when I was a kid. And really they were just not as exciting, the Mort Weisinger Superman sort of things. I The first DC book I started buying regularly was the Teen Titans when Nick Hardy was drawing it. But I started reading it with the weird storyline where they decide they can't use their powers anymore, which even as a kid, I thought this is really strange. You're like the fastest person in the world other than the Flash, but oh, I won't run fast because why? I don't understand. But anyways, I still was reading Teen Titans and really enjoying it, quite honestly, even though on a conceptual level it made no sense to me. So, but when I got my break, DC gave me my break, and I was very happy with that. So,
And you got to actually work on some of those characters that you mentioned, right? So you
yeah,
obviously Superman, right? So
Superman and
and a
Hawk
little
and
bit of
Dove.
X-Men,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So,
and
no,
Daredevil
yeah,
too. You had a almost a year run on Daredevil writing that I remember.
yeah. I think it was it 15 issues? Maybe not 15 issues, but yeah,
I
it
think
was about a year. Yeah,
Carrie Nord, I think, was the artist at that time.
yeah, and yeah. Whatever happened to him? Yeah, he was no, he's a great artist, and he's done really wonderful things.
Yeah,
And I think that was his first regular gig. I could be wrong about that, but
yeah,
yeah, he was really great.
yeah.
And
Sounds
I
like
have to say, my high point, nothing against Carrie, my high point of writing Daredevil was Gene Colan drew an issue.
oh,
And Gene Colan is my Daredevil artist. I mean, I love what Frank Miller did, really, but I love Gene Colan's Daredevil. There was no one who was better at showing a sense of movement and energy.
mm.
He was so good at it. And that really was the defining look of Daredevil in my mind until Frank Miller came along.
Yeah, and Gene Colan, what you're absolutely right about the movement, but a lot of it has to do also with the sense of mood that
Yeah,
he has in any of his work. We certainly had a really good run on the Captain America character as well.
sure you did. Yeah.
Um, so speaking of DC and Marvel preferences, you spent several years writing in the Superman universe, and you worked on also a few different Captain America stories. And so, like writers Mark Waid and Dan Jurgens, you are among a select few who can say they got into the minds of both characters. Um, do you see any similarities between the two?
Oh, I think so. Yeah, I do think there's strong similarities. They're very much leader characters, obviously, very confident characters. And I guess you can say that about a lot of people, but I think they exude it naturally. They don't have to show that they're a leader. It's like, when they walk in a room, oh, this is the guy I should be listening to. And there's no, they do that without any pretense is the wrong word, but they don't force it on you. Like I said, it's just so natural to them. This leadership and this clear thinking, very clear thinking. I actually would say Captain America thinks more clearly than Superman. You know,
All
so
right. I'll
but
take it.
he is like that strategic mind. I think he has a much more strategic mind than Superman has.
Let's dive into some of your cap work, and let's start with the Captain America Patriot miniseries that came out in 2010. So we know, because we talked to Roy Thomas on a previous episode, that he reintroduced the character of Jeff Mace in Marvel Premiere 29 back in April 1976,
Right.
and this reintroduced this character of the Patriot to modern audiences. And then, of course, he retconned Jeff Mace as the third Captain America in What If #4 back in August 1977. And this basically laid down the basic elements of the story that you tackled and really did flesh out in that 4-issue miniseries. So, what was the genesis of this miniseries? Where did the idea come from when this hit the rack?
What happened was Tom Brevoort had called me up and asked me to write a one-shot all-winter squad story. And there was some celebration, anniversary. I can't remember exactly what it was. So I said, yeah, sure, I'd love to. And so I knew the basic idea of the all-winter squad, but I sat down to figure out, okay, when does my story take place? And and who's the Captain America at this point, And it was the Jeff Mace Captain America. So I said, well, okay, who is that? And I read the Roy Thomas What If, and and I started going, and when I was reading up about it, they basically say, and he was Captain America for a while and he stopped. And I said, why would anyone stop being Captain America? What happened to him that made him say, thanks, but I think I'm going to move on?
Yeah.
That seemed to me to be a really interesting question, you know? And so I said to Tom Brevoort, what if we do a mini series about Jeff Mace, call it Captain America Patriot, and let's find out about this guy and what happens to him when he becomes Captain America, and what happens to him to make him want to walk away from what I guess you could argue is a pretty damn good job.
Yeah, it's got some risks, but you're right,
Yeah,
and that was
well, he
never
was
fully
already
explained.
yeah,
Yeah,
he was already putting his life on the line as Patriot,
true
right?
enough.
And
True
now
enough.
now he's got it's like a bigger platform.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know.
And the answer is what usually the answer is. It was a dame,
It was a dame. That's right.
right?
What other than love could have drawn him away from Captain America?
Right.
Of course, the thing with Jeff Mace is he did not have the super soldier serum, did he?
Mm.
He was just like a guy who was inspired by Captain America, and that's why he became the Patriot. And I had a lot of fun with that because he's trying to live up to something that physically he is really incapable of living up to. And there's that level, but there's also, as I said before, the leadership level. When Captain America is on the stage with the All Winter Squad, all eyes go to Captain America, and now it's like Jeff Mace, and everyone's looking at him, and I found all of that to be a really interesting thing to look into and explore.
Yeah, I will say, the story, it's new to me. I didn't read it back in 2010, so I'm more of a recent reader of the story. And what I really did appreciate was the fact that how you fleshed out this story of the third Captain America, how he became Captain America. We know from the What If story, but what happened from that point, and then to your point, why did he stop being Captain America? But it also seems like you had a lot of fun doing new retcons. Like you added your own elements to the story, right? So, for example, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby first introduced the Baxter Building in Fantastic Four #3, which was back in 1962 as the headquarters of the Fantastic Four. But it seems like you introduced it as a potential headquarters for the All Winners Squad. And was this your way of tying in those timely comics to kind of bring them into the Marvel universe, or were you just having some fun?
Well, I was having some fun, but I ran across that nugget somewhere online. Someone online had theorized that the All Winter Squad building became the Baxter Building,
Mm.
and I thought, why not? That sounds cool.
Right. It had a great backstory to it as well that you really fleshed in from the Fantastic Four as well. So it made perfect sense.
Yeah, yeah. No, I thought the pieces fit perfectly, so why not run with it? Yeah.
Mhm. So it does seem clear from your treatment of the Patriot story that you either came into the project or in the course of preparing for the project that you had a deep appreciation for the Golden Age mythos, especially characters like Jeff Mace and Mary Morgan and Jacob Casey, even Lenora Moore, Lavender, the original All Winners Squad, and then even, of course, later on the modern introductions of the Liberty Legion and the Invaders. And so I wondered, how well versed were you in the Golden Age stories, or was that something you had to do a deep dive in?
I had to do for the deep diving, I had to do a deep dive. I mean, I knew what I had read in Marvel Comics. So if they had reprinted an All Winners Squad story, I had read that. But I don't own Golden Age comics, and I don't own. I own some Golden Age collections from DC because I was on their comp list, but I own their archive editions. But I don't. I was not on Marvel's comp list, so I didn't get any of their compilations. So the internet was my friend there, and I did a deep dive on the internet to who all these characters were and what their relationship was, and I tried to figure out from what I knew and reading them what my take on the characters would be and stuff like that. Yeah. So yeah, but I probably knew no more than anyone else reading Marvel comics. That's
Well,
all I knew.
you did a great job getting boned up on it, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, it was interesting. You get into it, and it's fascinating stuff, and especially when you can see how little pieces can fit together and stuff like that. So,
So we,
um,
we do have a few questions sent in from our patrons, which we kind of like to sprinkle in through the conversation. And one of our patrons, Tom Boyd, he asked the same question as far as like what type of research you did for this. But he goes on to say, I'm also fascinated. He said, I'm reading the Patriot miniseries right now, and I'm fascinated about how he chose the stories from the 40s to reference in the Patriot. It was cool researching them and going back to read the 40s comics he drew. So you actually inspired him to go back and read the 40s comics to see it. But yeah, how did you go about that? How did you say, you know what, I'm going to pick some of these stories from there and kind of why flesh out this one and not something else? Like, what interests you?
well, of course, I had to flesh out the story where Bucky gets shot. That's a pretty important story in the Jeff Mace Captain America story. So Lavender. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Mark Wade sent me digital files for all of those old Captain America stories, so I could read, the original Captain America stories. But yeah, I mean, I would look at it. I mean, I actually wanted this to be a 5-issue miniseries, and Brevoort said Marvel would only let it be 4. So we had to really cram stuff down, and we had to strip it down to only the bare essentials that had to be told, the high points uh, of the character, of his history, like Bucky being shot, which would bring in Golden Girl and stuff like that. Um, there was more I wanted to do. It's been a long time, so I can't tell you what that was. But at first I did not think I could do it as only 4 issues. But it seems to have worked out well. Seems to have worked out well.
Yeah, well, it's definitely one of my favorite Cap stories, and I know it's not even Steve Rogers, right? It's Jeff Mace, but it has long been up there as one of my favorites. So even in 4 issues, you managed to make it a really rich adventure with a lot. I'm a big Golden Age fan and a
Uh,
collector of Golden Age comics, and
I can
and
see
I,
behind you.
well,
Yeah.
yeah, I have a few things, and I have that issue actually where Bucky gets shot. Fred Davis gets shot, by Lavender on the cover. So
Yeah.
so it tickled me to see that really played out so in so much detail, the before and the after of that event in the book.
Right.
But I want to ask you specifically about Namor, the Submariner, because you mentioned previously that anniversary. It was the 70th anniversary, and there were, I think, 11 or 12 one shots
Mhm.
where they took the timely titles and they did a one shot, and you did the All Winners 70th anniversary. And I remember that because in both stories, that and the Patriot, Namor had a really hard time accepting Jeff Mace.
Sure.
And Jeff, really tried to live up to, who Steve was, and then William after him, William Naslund. But he struggled with that. And it wasn't until the end of each story, I think, where Namor grudgingly gave him some acceptance. So that theme, was it important to you?
That's hard to say. I mean, I will say, writing that story made me love Namor. I really did not have a lot of use for Namor until I realized how great it was to have an asshole around. Uh,
Can you talk to my wife, please?
so I will say that, but that's I think maybe I don't know if I can answer your question directly, but maybe this can answer it. I will tell you, and I did not plan this, but an awful lot of what informed me writing Captain America Patriot was me being hired to write on Superman, because I was this second-rate creator who suddenly was being put into the A leagues. And I will tell you, I mean, Dan Jurgens and Jerry Ordway are old friends of mine. Roger Stern, I was walking into a room with friends, and I still felt like I felt like I was way out of my league. And Dan has told me more than once, no, the first day you were there, it felt like you'd been there forever, which is very generous of him. But that feeling of having really big shoes to fill really informed how I wrote Captain America Patriot.
That's awesome. I mean, that right there, that's what makes this show so great, Karl. Thank you for sharing that, because that helps you understand more that relationship between Jeff and Namor, and that struggle to find acceptance, and that imposter syndrome that I think he felt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Wow. So I do want to turn to the 1940s newspaper strip series, because that also came out in 2010, and that was such a unique and creative entry into the Captain America mythos. It's not something we'd ever seen before up until that point. And I know that series originally ran on Marvel Unlimited as a digital comic, and eventually was collected together into the 3-issue print publication. There had never been an actual Captain America serial back in the 40s or even 50s, but there had been an Amazing Spider-Man long-running syndicated newspaper strip that went from, I think, 1977 up through about 2019, and then it went into reprints for a few more years after that, and that's been collected as well. So I got to ask, what was the idea behind this? How did this project come to happen?
Well, I'm a huge fan of the old adventure comic strips. Milton Caniff is my idol. Well, and discovering Caniff when I went to the Kubert School changed my life. And I've often, I hate to say it, but I've often wished I was born 50 years earlier so I could have done adventure strips in the 30s. I've had a great career doing comic books, but if I could have done adventure strips in the 30s and 40s, I probably would have been so like, it would have been heaven. It would have been heaven. I mean, Kniff, Crane, Johnny Hazard by Frank Robbins. I just love this stuff, and even some of the more obscure stuff um, that a lot of people don't know about. I just find the adventure strip really, really. There's something about the pacing of it. 4 panels, just enough to build up some tension. Then there's a cliffhanger. You come back the next day. I just love everything about it. And so I said, once again, to Tom Brevoort, I said, back in the 40s, Superman had a comic strip, and Batman had a comic strip. I think Wonder Woman had one. Invisible Scarlet O'Neil had her own comic strip, and Captain America never did. We should fix this, And
A retcon.
Tom thought this was a great idea, and he got it approved somehow. And it is one of the very few projects that I wrote, penciled, and inked myself, which means it took a really long time for me to finish it. But I'm very proud of it. I actually, to gear up for it, I do have a hardcover collection of the first 10 issues of Captain America over here, the Kirby issues, and the Golden Age Kirby issues. And I took that down and I started trying to capture that look of Captain America, really sinewy, really stretched out.
Mm-hmm.
It was a little too much for Tom. He told me to draw it back, bring it back a little bit. But I really, really wanted to try to. I wasn't going to draw like Kirby, but I wanted that feel in there, that feel of the 1940s approach to figure work and storytelling. And probably as it went on, I lost that because I was more focused on figuring out how to draw it myself. But that's where it came from. I'm a huge love of old adventure comic strips.
Wow.
And back in the early 90s, I think it didn't come out until mid 90s. For Dark Horse, I actually did an Indiana Jones miniseries, and I approached that as a comic strip too. very similar to the Captain America thing.
You wrote in the collection, in the foreword, that this was the hardest and most satisfying job you ever worked on, at least up until that point in 2010. Why was that?
Well, because it was so close to my heart, is, my chance to do an adventure strip like that, all on my own. The Indiana Jones thing I was supposed to do on my own, and then I got an offer to write a book called Superman, and I didn't end up doing the Indiana Jones book all on my own. Some guy named Ed Barretto came in and finished it beautifully, did a much better job than I ever would have done. But I missed my chance to do my adventure strip with the Indiana Jones book. So this was my chance. And so I put a lot on myself. I really wanted it. I really wanted it to be my best work, and I'm very proud of it. I think it holds its own against adventure strips of the time. I would like to think, at least. I would like to think.
Well, it
Indeed.
does. I went back and of course, I reread it again prior to having you on the show, Karl. And I mean, it holds up again after 14 years of reading this over and over and over again. It's a beautiful and it's a fun story. It's got humor, it's got adventure, it's got suspense. So just and it's unique in 80 plus years of the Captain America comics that are out there.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you guys like it, because yeah, like I said, it means a lot to me. I but I structured it exactly like an adventure comic strip. The Sundays, you know, just like the Sundays back in those days, the first two panels you can remove and still read the rest of it and understand what's going on, because that's how the Sundays were structured. Kniff had to draw it so that the first two panels could be removed in case they wanted to squeeze another comic strip onto that Sunday page. And I followed all those rules because I wanted it to have that same feel, you know. And I thought it was a fun little story, and I was really hoping we could do more. I could have kept doing that forever, and I was going to bring Namor into the next story because I had gotten to love Namor by that point.
Well, I will circle back and address that, but I got to ask you first about Betsy Ross, because Rick knows that I got a thing for Betsy, and you introduced her right off in the very first issue of the newspaper strips. And Betsy has played a very important role in the Golden Age Captain America comics. She appeared in something like 28 issues of
Is
Captain
she
America
really?
comics.
Wow.
Yeah, and one issue of the Commie Smasher, in the 1950s relaunch of Captain America. And I mean, she had a very important role, even with what we now know was Steve Rogers, at one point having been engaged to both him and Sergeant Duffy as well. So, and she appeared also in a Young Allies story.
Wow.
So, she had this tremendous influence in the Golden Age, but in the modern Marvel universe, almost nobody knows who she was or the role that she had in the Captain America story, at least since Avengers 4. So I have to ask you, yeah, okay, this is 1940s, but it never stopped, any modern writers from retconning in a Peggy or some other love interest like Cynthia Glass. But you went back to the original. You went back to Betsy Ross. Was that what? I mean, did you give any thought to that, or was it just okay? That's what was in the original books, and that's what I'm going with.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it had to do, that's what was in the original books, and she fit what I needed, So why reinvent the wheel? You know what I mean? So yeah, I just put her in place there, and she worked well. She worked really well.
I thought it was pretty interesting that we see Betsy Ross. Apparently, she was disguised as the old woman in the curio shop, which was guarding the entrance to the secret lab.
Yeah.
Was that something you came up with?
No, 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 no. I saw that in one of the Captain America origins that I read.
That was Betsy Ross. Okay,
Yeah, and all I can say is I read it in a comic, and I said, yeah, I'll use that. Sure.
very cool.
Interesting. I have to look that up. I know we've had these discussions before about that curio shop woman before, and throughout the last 50 years or so, they've identified a number of different people who that could be. But certainly Betsy Ross is probably the best candidate. So as I said, there was a lot of humor in this story, Karl, and Steve had some great lines, no doubt about it. But I consistently got chuckles over some of Bucky Barnes's lines, like things that he exclaimed, like Boston baked beans and liver and onions, corned beef and cabbage, burned biscuits, spaghetti and meatballs. And my favorite was sweet smothered onions. So I got to ask you, what's up with the food references? Or were you just a starving writer at the time?
I have to say, I don't remember my specific thinking on that. I do like to cook a lot. I really enjoy cooking. Um, and you know how sometimes something happens in your life and it's a minor little thing to probably everyone else in the world, but it stays with you.
Mhm.
And I can't say for sure this is or is not why I did this. But do you remember the old TV series Ally McBeal?
Sure.
Oh, sure, yeah.
The guy who ran the law office, his girlfriend was that Asian Lucy, whatever,
Lucy
the
Liu,
actress.
right? Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
Mhm.
yes, his girlfriend. And there was a conversation they had at some point, and he was calling her little sweet names. And at some point, she says, "Yes, you can. Food names are fine. You can call me food names." And so from then on, whenever he would say, "How are you, my little dumpling?" and his all of his affectionate names for her were about food. And that has really stuck with me. And that could very well be why I decided all of Bucky's, exclamations would be food exclamations.
Oh, it was great. They just got better every time. So I mean, it had me chuckling throughout the story.
Sweet smothered onions.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm just putting two and two together. I mean, because Robin, the sidekick to Batman, always was like, holy fill in the
Right.
blank, right? So Bucky just went with food.
And he's a teenager, right? They think about food all the time. At least I
Yes.
did.
Indeed. Yes, they do.
I was thinking about something else, but
Well, there is that too.
yeah.
Comics, of course, Rick.
Yes.
Well, speaking of dialogue, another one of our longtime patrons of the show, Mark Domeyer, he asks, how do you get in the mindset to write dialogue from different time periods? The jargon of the 40s and the 50s and the Patriot and the newspaper strip is very different from today, which is very different from when you were writing Superman back in the 80s and 90s.
Well, some of it comes from, you know, living as long as I have and watching lots of old movies, and so, you start to get a feel for how people spoke in the different decades. Um, but also I also go online, or sometimes I've tracked down books about slang or lingo from different periods. And I'll read that over and oh, would it make sense for him to say 23 skidoo here? Probably not. I mean, part of it is ear and part of it is research.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So
and I guess just a follow up on that, just curious. Um, do you also have in the back of your mind when writing to not tie in to the current slang so that your story is not dated, right? So like if you're writing something today, you're not going to reference this or that. Do you think about that?
That's an interesting question. Of course, when I did Superboy, I used a lot of modern slang, which is probably horribly dated now. Um, that is interesting because I mean, I've got, my wife and I adopted two kids pretty late in life, and we got kids who are just becoming teenagers now. And I can tell you a lot of slang that I'd never heard when I was, their age. Sus is a big one among
right.
them.
Yeah.
All right, hold
So
on. All right, I got you have to school me. What does sus mean?
for suspicious, it's kind of shady. That's sus. They
Mhm.
don't quite trust what you're saying there.
I get that one a lot too at home, Carl.
Yeah.
I've got a 15-year-old, so yeah.
Yeah. So, but anyways, I know. I can't say that I avoid it. I probably, let me put it this way. I haven't written a teenager in a while, and I would be tempted to do it with a teenager, but I probably would avoid it simply to make the story. Now I would avoid it now to make the story more timeless, not so rooted in the time it's written. That would probably be my inclination now.
I got to ask you about that last panel in the last issue of the 1940s newspaper strip,
Yeah.
right? Because you've got what appears to be Bucky's mom showing up, Winifred Barnes, and of course, we later learned that she had passed away when he was just a child. We learned this in Captain America number 620, which came out many, many years later. But were you just sort of leaving a little tease, a little cliffhanger? Was there maybe a hope that there would be a follow-on
Oh well, yeah, I
series?
was hoping there'd be more. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I thought, and so I mean, I was just trying to, on one level, I was just trying to think of the best hook I could end on that would make people say, wait, we gotta have more of this. And I thought Bucky's mom sounded like a real great hook to end on.
Mm-hmm.
And now I don't have the page in front of me, but that was also a tribute to a Kniff panel, which kind of just there's a and I can't remember exactly what story it is, but there's some Sunday that Kniff drew, and it ends with the introduction of a gal, and basically all you see is her bust. And so that was my tribute to that really classic Kniff panel.
Wow, that's great.
Um, but um, but yeah, I really was hoping that Tom would say, yeah, people. He actually was telling me, and I've heard it from other people that the editors were really excited every time a new batch of Captain America strip came in. They really enjoyed the thing, but I guess it wasn't profitable. I guess that's really what it comes down to. It wasn't profitable. So they weren't going to do any more, which is too bad because I would have done that for years.
When it comes to writing, uh, how important to you, like, do you have a preference? Because there's always a balance between those quiet moments that offer some more, characterization, and we get to learn a little bit more about the characters, and then there's the action, right? And we've had different writers on the show, and they talk about, well, you need to make sure you've got that one fight scene in there, but I really want to talk about this. How do you approach writing in any story that you do, when you're trying to make that balance?
I don't know if I can answer that. I mean, it, and I'm not sure I always balanced it well. I will say, I mean, everyone's their own worst critic, but I look at most of my stuff and go, maybe I should have done this differently. You know what I mean? Um, so a lot of it is just instinct. I think it really comes down to that, at least for me. And I am a pretty instinctive creator. I know Kurt Busiek really well, and I'm amazed. I'm amazed how you can. Kurt will say, "I got this idea for, say, Captain America. I got this idea for Captain America, and he'll do this, this, and this." And I'm just making up a scenario. And then Tom Brevoort might say, "Well, Kurt, that's a good idea, except you know." Captain America, right then, we're going to have him in suspended animation again. And Kurt will go, all right, instead of Captain America, it can be this, and we change this. Kurt's got this amazing mind, and it's like a Rubik's Cube. And he just keeps switching things around until all the pieces fit for everyone. And I'm not like that. So I'm like, I really want to do a Captain America comic strip, and if you let me do it, I'll have a lot of fun, and you know, um, so anyways, yeah, for me, I got no good answer for you. It's instinctive, and a lot of times, I write kind of Marvel style, kind of full script, but I write a short paragraph for each panel on a page, and then the artist I'm working with can, if I have 5 paragraphs, they could make it 4 panels if they want. They can make it 7 panels if they want, and in it, I will probably have a suggestion for what's being said. But sometimes I just say, Bucky makes a joke because I know pacing wise, we need a break here. We need just a little light in the dark moment or whatever it is. And I might not know what the joke is, but that's once again, I'm working instinctively there. So that's how I do it.
One of our listeners wants to put you on the spot. Um,
Oh,
so, one of our patrons of the show, his name is John Waller Sewell, and he asks, "I'm a big fan of the Tangent universe that Mr. Kesel helped build with DC Comics years ago. So I'd like to know if Marvel ever did their version of a Tangent universe where the only things that remain the same are the character's name. What would he do with the name Captain America?"
oh boy, wasn't expecting this question. So, this is boy, that's a good question. What would I do with it? More than any of the other names, I mean, Spider-Man, there's a lot of different ways you can do a spider, as we have seen lately. Um, but Captain America, there's weight to the name. You know, you're symbolizing a country, symbolizing a philosophy, whatever you want to say. So it's a lot harder to figure out what else you would do. Um, Boy, that's a tough one. And do something different too. You know, I just sitting here right now, and I'm not saying this is a good idea, but what I'm thinking of is, you know, what if Captain America in this tangent universe isn't really a person, but is a movement? And you know, the name Captain America is spray painted on walls, and that's the symbol. The shield symbol with the star in the middle. That becomes the graffiti of the rebellion or whatever. I don't know. That's what I'm thinking of right now. That's the best I can do
I like
given
that.
5 minutes.
Yeah, that has
And
some
so then,
legs, I think.
okay, talk
Talk.
to CB Zabalski and see if we
Okay.
can get that one going.
All right, we'll do it. All right, so what else is keeping you busy nowadays? Are there any projects coming up that you can share with the listeners? What's what's the latest with Impossible Jones?
Well, I was going to say that's what's keeping me busy. I've been kickstarting the book Impossible Jones for quite a while now. Probably 5 years now, doing it off and on. I work with David Hahn, he's the penciler, and I write and ink it. And I'm just this coming Friday, I'm going to ship off the latest Impossible Jones book to the printer. Should get it back in about a month. So I'll be fulfilling that in April, I think.
For our listeners who may not be familiar with Impossible Jones, can you give them
Sure.
kind of a teaser?
Yeah, the idea of Impossible Jones is she's a thief and she gets superpowers, and due to the circumstances around her getting powers, she is mistaken for a superhero, where she really, that was not her plan. But when she's mistaken for a hero, she decides to run with it because there's a lot of things she can get away with now that she couldn't as a wanted thief. I mean, as a superhero, the police tell her where they're going to be on patrol, and the jewelry store is happy to show her their security system, happy to show her it, and she has not given up her thieving ways. She goes off and still robs that because now she's got superpowers. It's easier than ever, and it's about the balancing act about trying to be perceived as a hero and using that to her thieving advantage. And so in Impossible to Love, she finds herself attracted to a guy named Demolition. He can blow up anything he touches, and she can't tell him that she's really kind of on his side of the law. And so there's that tension there. And I actually, I think it's some of the best work David's done on the series. I think it's the best single story we've done with Impossible Jones. Um, so I'm very proud of it, very happy with it. But
And how
that,
many issues are you up to now?
well, it's hard to say. We did 4 issues that we did as this Impossible Jones hardcover. And then we did 4 more floppies, except when I say floppies, see, this is one of the problems with creator-owned books when you kickstart them, and that's what we're doing, is I'm not limited to how many pages I do.
Mm.
I sit there and I say, okay, I think this is a 24-page story, and it becomes a 30-page story. And why not? It needs 30 pages. And with this second round of floppies, our last floppy was 80 pages long.
Wow.
So our next collection is considerably thicker. This is theoretically 4 issues of a comic, but it's 258 pages long
Oh
with
wow!
with an Arthur Adams fold out. We got an Arthur Adams, Art Adams did a
Whoa!
fold
That's
out for
awesome.
us.
Yeah, you've had some really big names as collaborating. I know. Speaking, you were talking about Dan Jurgens earlier. Didn't he do a variant cover for one of your issues?
He did for one of the first in the second volume. Yeah, and I've sold all of those variant covers, and I'm never ever reprinting that art ever.
Hmm.
So that was my promise. Maybe it was foolish because everyone loves that Dan Jurgens cover, and it's a
Well,
great cover. It really
yeah.
is.
And how can listeners learn more about Impossible Jones?
Well, the easiest way, I guess, because I'm really bad at keeping a website up to date. There's a website, but it's horribly out of date. But if they go to impossiblekickstarter.com, that actually takes them to my uh, fulfillment store. And so they can, it doesn't really tell you a lot about the character, but you can see all the different books, and we got t-shirts and we got
Hmm.
pins. And so you can see what's there. That's easiest way. impossiblekickstarter.com.
All right. Well, and there'll be a link in the show notes too for
I
easy
appreciate that.
access for people to find that.
Yeah.
So, anything else going on?
Really, it's amazing how much time when you are writing and inking and editing and talking to the printer and fulfilling,
Hmm.
it's amazing how that fills up your day.
I bet. Yeah.
So, and I have to say, I love it all. That's one of the things I learned doing Kickstarters is every step of the process I really enjoy. I enjoy that I spend a couple of weeks in the basement putting packages together and sending them out. And I enjoy looking at that list of names of the people that have supported me and, oh, he's back again. It's great to see that she's back again. And oh, she's getting a sketch. And, and you start, I really enjoy the really direct connection with the fans. It's much more, I mean, you have even more direct if you go to shows. I don't go to a lot of shows for a lot of different reasons, but so this way I have some really direct connection with the fans, and I really enjoy that a lot.
Well, fantastic. Well, we encourage people to check that out. Make sure you look at the link in the show notes. So, Karl, thank you for coming on the show. It was so much fun wrapping cap with you.
I love wrapping cap myself. Yeah.
Sweet smothered onions. That was a good time.
Words to live by. Words to live by.
All
How
right.
about that, Bob? Karl, I enjoyed having Karl on the show. He's
Yeah.
a really nice gentleman.
And he seemed like he was having fun, which who can blame him? We're two fun guys.
I have an antibiotic I'm taking for that.
They have something for that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I mean, look, he's done some great work around the Captain America. It would be crazy not to have him on the show.
I mean, he's done great work. Period. I mean,
Well,
have you
yeah.
looked at this man's, biography, or bibliography, I should say,
Mm-hmm.
uh, from 1984, to present day. I mean, it's 40 years of creative output that he had there, and I looked at it, and it was, he started off as an inker, and then he started writing, and then he started doing a little bit of both back and forth. And I looked at it, and where did I have it? So he had inking stories over 250, writing over 330, and then doing both over 50.
Wow.
And so yeah, he's very, very prolific, and seems like a really super nice guy too.
Yeah. I mean, his work on the newspaper strip was, I mean, it's just so, I don't know what the word, I mean, it's refreshing, it's wholesome, it's just fun. And the fact that he did that project essentially by himself is really impressive. I wish there had been more. I understood it was done initially as a digital comic for Marvel Unlimited, and then they pulled the plug on that project. But it would be really cool to see more of that sort of thing, because I think it's great for adults, it's great for kids, and it holds up. You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree 100%. I enjoyed reading it for the first time recently, so I did enjoy that. All right, come back next episode where we're going to be going back to our long tail story, which is the uh, Steve Englehart, Sal Buscema follow up to Secret Empire, and that is when Cap becomes Nomad. So we're doing part 2 of this, which is going to be Captain America 177. So make sure you come back next episode where we will cover that panel by panel.
That sounds good to me. I think I'll probably put that on my calendar.
All right. Well, Bob, as always, fun wrapping Cap with you.
It has. I can't wait till next week, Rick.
All right, he's Bob Lucius. I'm Rick Verbanis, and thank you for listening. We appreciate it even more so that you have, if you rate and review and subscribe wherever you listen. And we appreciate the comments on our Facebook pages. We haven't seen a 5-star review on Apple in a while, so hint, hint, always appreciate those. And of course, if you're on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and hit that thumbs up. And as always, we appreciate you listening to another episode of the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast.